It is 8:35, and as I mentioned before, I always want to be respectful of everyone's time and be as flexible as possible, but also know that, Assalamu alaikum, that we all have very busy schedules. And so first, I actually wanted to offer some time to check in with everyone, and also I think kind of use this as a moment that we can sort of use as an example of how we might be kind of engaged or asked to serve different communities during times of kind of national tragedy. So I wanted to acknowledge today that it's the 7th anniversary of the Oak Creek Massacre in Wisconsin, when someone opened fire on a Sikh Guardia. And I haven't heard much about it on the news, and I have some dear Sikh friends that I reached out to ask them how they were doing. It's also, I'm sure many of you have heard or been following the news out of Dayton, Ohio, and of El Paso, Texas. And there's, I think there were like 7 murders in Chicago over the weekend. And so I honestly felt very heavy all through the weekend and today. And also thinking about how we're asked to sort of absorb all of that and then show up to the different places that we have to be in certain ways. For me, it was also, I have friends of mine who are Christian clergy, and one of them, she's a Black lesbian woman, and she was preaching yesterday at a predominantly white congregation. And she shared, publicly about kind of feeling almost like overwhelmed and not knowing what to say, and how she might be able to, or in what way she'll be asked to sort of do so much emotional labor on behalf of the white congregation in sort of naming white supremacy, naming nationalism, naming that it appears, especially in El Paso, that that community was targeted because they're Latino. And so, she's like, I don't want to preach today. And some of the work that I've been doing sort of within the Black Muslim community was around, there had been sort of online an escalation of tension between Black American Muslims and East African Muslims, with someone who has a fairly large following on Twitter making really disparaging remarks about Black American converts, especially. And so, I tried to sort of step in and intervene as gently as possible, which is hard to do on a public platform. Like, it's just not designed for people to be thoughtful. That's my own opinion. And so, there was some other conversations that happened offline, and, trying to do some mediation. But, I'm sort of thinking how, based on who we are or how people understand us to be, we either might feel compelled to sort of step in certain moments, or when you have 2 massacres within a space of 24 hours, right? Like, where do you find the words, right? Where do you find sort of the capacity to provide guidance, to say something coherent? And so I wanted us to start, since this is what's sort of happening in the world right now at this moment. I also want to acknowledge that, especially for my friends who are Kashmiri, what's happening in India right now. So there's a lot. There's a lot that's happening. And so I want to acknowledge that and that we might all be kind of plugged in different ways, but it is still, whether consciously or subconsciously, sort of surrounding us. And so, wanting to kind of open up space just to talk about what you might be feeling or thinking about in this moment. And so I want to open the floor to you all for your comments and reflections.
Personally, I'm a little numb by all of it. I had several social get together this week, and people just wanted to talk about that. And for me, I had to leave the situation. I couldn't. I've read so much about it, heard so much about it that I've reached maximum capacity this weekend in just hearing and seeing the news. I got on my bike and rode 30 miles on Saturday and just felt the air through my hair and just pay attention to the road and pedaled. That was my therapy.
Yeah. Were you able to communicate to the people that you were with why you had to step back?
I understood that some people needed to vent a little bit. They needed an outlet, and I didn't want to be the person to get in the way of that. I thought it was easier for me to remove myself rather than impede someone else's needs.
Okay. How about others? Because all of the things that we learned in the past few weeks, I really felt like became relevant this weekend, right? About knowing your own signs of burnout, and either you're being asked to step up or maybe feel compelled to kind of step into certain spaces to provide a certain presence. And so, curious to know how you all have been navigating that.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
I think for me, it's because of my background, there's a history of something always going on in this regard, sort of this tension and stress. I'm in Oakland, in the Oakland area. So, there's streams of violence and pockets of violence in certain area, even where I work. So there's this sort of constant awareness that I have. And when I heard about the shootings, I'm already sort of always in this mode of being real careful. And I found myself personally in my movement through the city as I was doing things, just a bit more on guard. I shared, looking at it from a strategic standpoint in terms of survival, because, there's several components to it. It's how it affects us physically, the emotionally, thoughts we have around it. And then there are modes of behavior that we should have and strategies on, how to stay safe. So as I was, looking at the stream of things in the social media, I just posted things like staying aware, not being paranoid, but just staying aware. There's always this pattern, or there's these, I sort of see things in patterns. So I wasn't real surprised. And so the kinds of things that I wanted to post were around staying out of large groups, trusting your gut, being more aware, not being paranoid, but being more aware, looking at movements, how people move. Because usually you could, be in a space and you can see a difference in movement. I can, at least. And so I just wanted to, bring my family and friends awareness up to that particular regard in the broader sense, while the private conversations are around, more intimate circumstances that include what's going on presently in conjunction with, personal problems. So while all of this is going on, everyone is still having their own personal problems, and it's just so compound. But when I think about it in general, just, what's happening in the world, not just how we treat each other, but just, what's happening on the planet with life, the water, the air, the soil, the trees, it's, really that big. And so I just in thinking, because I don't start back to work until towards the end of the week. School is out. So we start back towards the end of the week. And I know it's going to be high on our list of priorities for our children who are already traumatized. So they're going to come back to school really concerned because, we deal with shootings in the neighborhood. Right. We have lockdowns in the neighborhood. And so here is the end of summer and they're doing their summer shopping. Like I was out today with my son and we were near a Target. You know what? We were near Target and he needed something. And then in my mind, I was thinking Walmart. I say, don't go up to that Walmart, and so it's just sort of this, how to live and be present while being careful as an adult. That's a lot of navigation, internal navigation, and trying to see, the cause. And then knowing that young people are going to be coming soon, instead of entering on a happy note, going to be entering with a sense of fear because of the climate that, they're already growing up in. So it's a bit much, and so when I appreciate you beginning this way, I had a very long day. I'm really drained. And I'm sitting here. And then when you began, I said, oh, that's the other part of why I'm so drained, though there's some other things going on that I'm dealing with, because this is almost kind of quote unquote normal in the way that the media advertise violence and negativity so constantly, the court channels, it's just like murder and shooting and violence, and is sort of a part of the thread of entertainment that we become numb to it. And it's just a lot to navigate, to awaken the sensitivities to say, no, this isn't normal. Right. And then two, to manage, the own sort of weight that you have with, living and sustaining yourself and family and friends, and then trying to see, that bigger picture, because it goes back to a bigger picture. And I'll just say lastly, what I'm in my thinking and sort of my feeling more so, it sort of crossed my spirit today is that, it's circumstances like this, kind of like water, there was something on about water and its composition the other day. And that when it begins to get cold, the molecular structure of water rearranges itself. That's why it expands. And that as an effect of something that has caused it, and that humanity is going through something when we look at it on the larger scale, and that, inshallah, mashallah, and that Allah will bless us and show us what it is that we need to do so that we can help, everyone, our young people. And I don't really look at race, but you have to get race sensitive in subjects like this.
Naimat, I'm gonna.
Okay, I'm gonna stop. Thank you.
Listen to me. I'm noticing how much time you spent talking about how you were caring for other people, right? Like what you posted, what you said. But then you also mentioned that you felt heavy. And I think that was maybe like two or three sentences in what you shared. And so I'm highlighting that because I think that might be a way for, at times, for us to go, right? Is to think about, how can I provide sort of, in therapy is like containing. How can I contain what other people might be feeling? And I'll just say this kind of by way of example. I'm on my way. My office is very close to my home, but with the way my family is set up, everybody would be in this shot right now, right? And so, I said, let me go to the office so I have like a nice, peaceful place to kind of be with you all. And I thought to myself on the way here, I'm so tired, right? Like I have been sort of, fielding different sort of conversations or moderating in some way. And I thought to myself, I was like, you know what, maybe I should like freshen up my face, like put on some makeup or something, right? So I don't look so tired, right? And then I caught myself, right? Like how often we try to, in some way, dress up what we're feeling so people don't know, or pretend as if, for us, it's just kind of like another day, we do this work and we keep it moving, and right. And so I had to check myself, right? And say, well, what will be the point of me, putting on a little makeup and kind of acting like I haven't had a really long day. It's almost 9 o'clock here, right? So before I guess is thinking about kind of like layers, right, of processing. And one is kind of doing sort of a body scan, a check-in with where you are first. And then how, different events might radiate out from there, because what you also described, right, was having a certain level of hypervigilance and awareness that you use to then help protect your family, right, or the people that you love. But that comes with great cost, right? And I want us to always think about the and, right? Like we can be helpers and we are affected, right, by the very things that we try to manage. And so for you to move into a space or to have become almost as part of like second nature, right, to scan and to look and to see threat and to think about where could be safety, if something went down, like that takes enormous amount of emotional and mental energy, right? And what I started to think as you were describing that is like, where do you rest? Where do you find safety, right? What does it mean for us to live in the world where we're all going back to school, right? I mean, back to school shopping, or, students are out and kind of about, you're going to Target, Walmart, you could be at a movie theater, like just to be in a moment, right, where the types, you could be at church, right? You could be at the masjid. So we're living in times where finding safety is a challenge, right? And so acknowledging kind of like the wear and tear that might put on our bodies is sort of where I want us to kind of evaluate, right, and do that assessment. So, Fong said, you know what, everybody wanted to talk about it. I understood, but I had to get on my bike. Like I had to pedal. I had to, I couldn't, right? My capacity for that conversation, had been exhausted. And so I'm saying this all to say that when I hear you, because I don't want you to think like I'm kind of like picking on you, because that's absolutely not what I'm doing.
No, I don't feel picked on.
But just kind of as a reminder that we often move into roles like very seamlessly, and that role is usually to take care, right, and to provide sort of kind of like a bird's eye, or, to think about like, what can we glean from this tragic, like, right? So we very quickly move there before we have fully metabolized everything that is happening for us. And so I kind of want to just, slow the car down a little bit so, you know, we can figure out how we're doing as we're trying to navigate all of these different things.
Yes, I hear you. And I want to add, you know, like right now, I'm supposed to be somewhere else, but I canceled it. You know, someone just sent me a text to do something on Friday, but I said I can't do it. And so I don't mind, you know, like saying no. I can say no, and I try to do that, like scan my body, you know, because I know where my tension lies. I could tell when I was young, I would just go, but now I'll stop and I'll listen. And the way I have my home set up, and I think it's sort of I don't think it is, you know, I have my aromatherapy lamps. I have, you know, it's set up in a way to where as soon as I walk in the door, and so I could be still, I can be quiet, and I could, you know, pray, and I can think. And then when I go back outside, then it's on.
Okay. Well,
Thank you.
Assalamu
Thank you so
alaikum.
much.
Walaikum
Assalamu
salam.
alaikum. This is Fatin. I'm with you by way of phone today, but I wanted to kind of comment because I noticed, I think the class has made me much more conscious of certain deficiencies, I will say. So I noticed that immediately after those tragedies, I started to think about everybody else. So I understand the cautionary advice because we go right into that place of, you know, what about the disaster relief chaplaincies? What about the survivors? What about, you know, everybody else? What do I tell the community? How do we advise them? And I never stop to say, you know, as the book, one of the authors mentions, the body keeps the score. You know, I never stop to think about my own trauma, you know, and my own pain. And so I'm much more aware of it now after the class. So I did kind of like it flashed across my mind, you know, you're not thinking about anything but, you know, you go into this place of service, you know, and I think I mentioned that in this last assignment, you know, that it always runs together. You know, we're always in this state of mind where we're thinking about how to serve others and never just stop to breathe and say, you know, what do I do for me? How am I affected by it? Not just thinking about the safety of my family, but just how I feel about the world that we're living in now and the dangers, you know.
Absolutely. So what has it been like for you to now have that kind of awareness where at least you'll pause and say, wait, hold on a second. How has that been different for you?
It's new and it's refreshing, even though I haven't, you know, like you don't master, you don't go from, you know, overkill to overnight being that, but it's something to take note of, and I'm very conscious of at least this new kind of thinking, and I appreciate that.
Anyone else have either a similar experience or you see your kind of awareness shifting a bit?
I was just going to share briefly just because kind of piggybacking over what my brother just said. I feel like this class, and even in the last assignment, I was having some issues when I submitted it because I wasn't sure if I addressed the questions, because I feel like I was having a lot of introspection about where I dedicate my time and how much I care for others and how little I spend on myself. And so I think that the assignment and just the physical act of being aware and practicing that awareness of where do I fall on the list of priorities. And so it's helped me to shift how I process things. And so when everything happened, I think I've been on this kind of, these last few weeks have been very much go, 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 with a lot of, you know, denominational assembly responsibility and the summer class and some other things that are going on with family. And we just had a another assembly, but this was for like the Hispanic churches in our region. And so it kind of triggered me in a more specific way. Anytime there's anything that happens like that, it always hits me really hard. And I always carry a lot of weight because I'm a mom, I have young kids. And it's like what we've all been sharing. It's no longer like these odd, specific locations. I mean, it's in farmers markets, it's people who are being, with car, it could happen in any way. And so I think coming off of the assignment and just some of my own kind of internal work of understanding myself and how some of my patterns have emerged, I kind of just, I didn't go to church on Sunday. I stayed home. I was with my girls. I had to just kind of take care of me. I felt it in my body. I felt it in my shoulders. I felt it like I was carrying so much tension in my shoulders and upper back and neck. It was painful. And so, because I shop at Walmart, and it's not just about like, it was just like, these are things that are happening to very specific communities of people. And it's all so much that I said I couldn't try to offer words of encouragement or support when I myself am feeling completely numb, and I found myself kind of disconnecting. And I think that when things trigger me or when things hit me, I know for myself, I kind of just dissociate. And so I decided to allow myself to kind of process and insulate if necessary, because I think that in order to be present and caring and to be authentic in wanting to give a message of hope and wanting to relay strength, and that this doesn't define us as a country, and that we need to keep, providing that force of love and strength and unity that I know we all share across our different faiths and our different approaches to, connecting to the divine. I was like, I need to just stop. And so that's what I had to do. I before I would feel guilty, but I think given where I had been just mentally been with the assignment and looking at my time and where I placed myself, I said, you know what, just don't do anything. What you need to do is stop and just, just stop. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And, for kind of walking us through, even just the naming, like I feel the tension in my shoulders, right? That you wanted to, you say you wanted to be with your girls, like you wanted to have them with you and make sure they were safe. And I think, there's, especially in the beginning, there's sort of like a bittersweet, it can be bittersweet to have that awareness, and in so many ways that it can free you. And it can also, at times be upsetting, like you've denied yourself the ability to, open up the space and kind of give yourself permission to be in a certain way. Because you may think like, oh man, right? I've been going for so many years, and maybe I needed a break a long, long time ago, right? And didn't take it, but you're taking it now. So I wonder if that resonates with some other folks here.
Assalamu alaikum. Can I comment on that?
Yeah, sure. Oh, did we lose him? Oh, okay.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay. All right. So I remember, and this is something that happened to me to kind of make me pay more attention. I think I thought for a moment that I was like this superman, super imam, where you could like take on all the troubles of everybody, forget to evaluate yourself. But this actually hit me at a time I was going through a divorce, and I think I shared this in the class briefly. I revert back to those times now when I become overwhelmed with not other people, just issues in the world and things that are happening within the community. Um, I remember that time because it was so scary for me. I took about maybe like a 5-month hiatus. I had to just step back. I told, told my community that I have to take some time out for myself. And, they were very open. They was very appreciative, like, take as much time as you need. We know you do a lot. And I'm glad that they recognize that I am a person that overextends myself when necessary. But if I didn't do that, I think I would have probably had a nervous breakdown because I was trying to balance my desire to support and help. It's a responsibility for me, right? So when you're responsible for something, and a person like me, I feel that I have to maintain and protect that responsibility. And it had become so overwhelming that I was losing myself. And at first I kind of felt like, well, nobody is noticing that I'm slipping. But my best friend, he had a heart-to-heart talk with me. We were driving to Eid. I remember this Sunday so clearly. He said, I was just rambling on, and he stopped me in the middle of me talking. He said, "Imam, you doing too much." He said, "Matter of fact, pull over the car. I need to drive." He said, "I know you always talking, but I need to talk. I need to do the talking now." He said, he said, "I know what you're dealing with." He said, "I know you miss them boys." He said, I can hear it in your voice." He just said, he just evaluated me, and it made me say, okay, the spotlight is on me now. And I really do need to sit back. That moment for me, and I thank him to this day for being able to recognize not the imam but his friend. He was able to recognize something in me. And even when I get to that point with the responsibilities of the community and with my family, even now, this has been such an eye-opening experience for me, being here on Hajj, making me want to be more evaluating and not put other people's interests above my own. And I say that in a way, mean preserve myself. There's a verse in the Quran that says, "Oh, you who believe, save yourself, then your family." Save yourself, then your family from a fire whose fuel is men and stone. And the saving of the self is so important. Is what I'm focusing on, because Tyree, what can you do if you're no more good and everybody else is still deficient? So, we all can't be deficient at the same time. We all going to have to be able to measure. I know I have to be able to measure my time and save some for myself, not empty my well, so to speak. My well can't be empty to whereas I don't have a drink left for me at the end of the day. So I can definitely resonate with what everybody is saying. It just touches different moments of my life, and even presently. Alhamdulillah, I thank Allah for the class. Like Imam Fatina said, it has made me become more aware of myself in areas that I had neglected before. So thank you.
Well, I'm happy to hear that it's kind of like almost like opening your chest, right? When you start to kind of breathe in a different way. And I also want to acknowledge that it's hard, right? It's hard to kind of shine that light on yourself. It's hard to recognize where you might have been neglectful of yourself, because then it brings up issues of shame and guilt and, anxiety, perfectionism, right? Like, I thought I had this all together. I'm supposed to be the example. This weekend I was scheduled to go to a board meeting in DC. I'm a board member of Muslim Advocates, which is a civil rights organization for Muslims. And I had to, turn in my last chapter of my dissertation, which I did. My daughter's getting ready to go to Jordan. And so, and I was up half the night, Friday night, right? I said, well, I could drive to DC and then I can come back and I could do this. And I finally had to say, just email the board and tell them, unfortunately, you cannot attend, right? And if you want to give, sort of reasons, fine. And I thought, how I could have slept so much better. I sent that email Friday night instead of Saturday morning, right? And so, I'm saying that to say, like, it's still, right, something that you constantly work on. And then having friends, especially that could keep me accountable, right? One friend said to me, she's like, are you writing? Because I see that you're tweeting, right? And you said you had some writing you had to do. And I said, no, these are breaks that I'm taking in between my writing. But I appreciate the fact that, you know, you love me enough to be like, I'm going to come take your phone if you don't stop. And so I want to, you know, again, if anyone else has some, you know, reflection that they want to share, kind of like what you've been learning, or in light of sort of this past weekend's tragedies, how you see your space, your energy, you know, your thinking shift just slightly, because now you have to be more intentional about your time. So I want to open it to anyone else who might want to share their reflections.
Well, Assalamu alaikum, this is Enrique.
Walaikum
You know,
salam.
I'm sitting here in the parking lot of my job. Now, you know, I'm thinking about, I came in last night from Indonesia.
Uh-huh.
And I came into San Francisco, and so I wanted to, my mother is 99. I think I mentioned she had went into hospice. So, you know, I wanted to go see my mother's, and I went to my sister's, spent the night there. I didn't get to my sister's until midnight. So I slept over, and I had planned to leave, come to work today. So my sister said, are you going to work? I said, well, yeah, I'm supposed to be at work. And I'm at work. I mean, I'm in the parking lot. Now I'm late. If I get to work at any time, I get credit for the whole day. And I did call my boss earlier today and told him I would probably be a little later. But I have a program at the prison at about 6:30-ish, which is about 20 something minutes from now. But I'm just saying, I could have took off today. Now, I mean, I could have, without, you know, I told my boss, I said, hey, I got in late. So I could have just said, hey, you know, I'm just going to take off. I'm not going to come in. But I'm sitting here in the parking lot, you know, just thinking about this now. That's one part of what I got to say.
Okay.
And that's something for my own evaluation. I'm going to think about that, you know, a little more, you know. But I will say that I did a lot of reflecting. Matter of fact, I did a lot of writing on the airplane. I was on 2 airplanes, one for 5 hours and one for 13 hours. So I did do a lot of writing, and a lot of things happened while I was on this trip. Matter of fact, my wife's mother passed.
Oh.
Yeah, she went into the hospital. She was I don't know if it was the day I was talking. The next day I think we went out of town, and then they called us that night and said, hey, she slipped into, you know, another state, and you should come back. So we came right back the next day. We were gonna go because we had done nothing but worked, and you know, I had a lot of things I had done. I went and had an interview for a job. A lot of things happened. So we were going to take a few nights and just kind of, we've been apart from each other for the last 5 months, you know, so since March. So, you know, we were just going to take some time for ourselves. So we had to go back. We got there. She was in ICU. The next day we came back. The doctor called, said, hey, you should come to the hospital. And so we sat down with the doctor, my wife, and basically said, you know, they've done all they can do, blah, blah, blah. So we sat with her, did some dhikr, and just kind of sat with her, and the medicine ran out, and we said, you know, no more. And she convinced her sisters and them just to let go. And we sat with her, and this was the first time I actually sat with somebody and until they expired. And it's the first time also that I witnessed them, where you say pulling the plug. Well, they literally, the doctor took one of the sisters to unplug the machine, and literally out of the wall. He did, you know, the father didn't want to do it, so one of the sisters did it, and we sat there and watched her pass, you know. So it was like, you know, and then that was at a little after 2 o'clock in the afternoon. By Maghrib, we were at the cemetery. She was in the ground.
Oh.
And we were filling the grave, and the adhan for Maghrib was going off in different masjids around us. So it was like, that was like quick. You know, they did that. They, you know, did everything. And then we had, you know, went to the house. A lot of people came. And for the next 3 days, people just came, you know. And actually, the guy who I'm going to be working with over there, he has a villa up in the mountains, and he offered us to go there Friday night. But because all this stuff was going, we decided not to even do that. It was too much, you know. And the last day I was there, we went to their house, had a gathering. I gave a short talk on this, you know. And it's funny because I made 2 presentations while I was there, this one and another one to a business group. But one of the things I talked about in the business group was self-care. I did. I included that. Matter of fact, I did a PowerPoint presentation, and one of my slides was on self. You know, I mean, I mentioned self-care because it's a training center. So you know, I put that in there. But all this trip, I was thinking about, you know, my reflecting, because it was a lot. You know, when death comes, you do a lot of reflecting anyway. And my mother, you know, was going to all these things. Now, the good news is I went to see my mother last night, and she woke up and looked at me, and she was smiling. And, you know, she was cool. She's back eating again. So now they planning her 100th birthday party in November. So anyway, but she's still on the hospice list, you know. So
Enrique,
yeah,
I just want to, like I said earlier, kind of like slow the car down a little bit.
Yeah, I guess so. I am a little all over the place.
No. Listen. Because what I also hear, right, is you taking the space to almost like you just exhaled all the things that you have been dealing with, coping with, managing, facilitating, right? You went from, you know, your mother-in-law passing away and dealing with that, and then I'm sure you have jet lag, right? And so coming back right from Indonesia, you're going to work, you're going to see your mom, and it's almost like an avalanche. Right. And sometimes we think that we're running away from the avalanche by continuing to run.
Right.
Like if I just keep going, right, it can't catch up with me. Right. But what did we just say? Your body keeps the score.
Yeah, that's true. I got that book too.
Okay, good.
I do have that book. Yeah.
Yes. And so,
but I'm that's why I say I'm sitting in the parking lot at my job. So I mean, but you know, this is kind of natural for me.
No.
This is not even, you know, I don't feel like, I mean, I am evaluating it in my mind because of this class too.
Yes. And I hear that.
Yeah. But I'm still here.
And what I also hear you doing when you say like, oh, you know, but I'm evaluating it. But what I also hear you saying is, but I'll be okay. This is what I do, right? This is right. And so what I'm saying is sometimes we have to separate how we know we can cope, right? Because when you're put in certain circumstances, right? Sometimes it's partly adrenaline, right? Like you got to do the things you need to do, and so but our bodies were not designed for that kind of sustained, right? Adrenaline, go, right? Because then it actually starts to have the opposite effect of what it was intended, right? It can start to erode, right, your body. And so when we start to point out where our limits are, right, it's not to say that you are not capable, that you are not strong, that you cannot, you know, fly from Indonesia, go see your 99-year-old mom, then drive to work, and right? We know you can do this, right? What we're saying is, should we?
Right.
Right. And so
Well,
even hold on, right? Because I'm trying to slow the car down, and you want to go 90 miles.
Hey,
right?
I was going 90 a few minutes ago.
Yes. But I could, so let me open it up to the class. Could you hear?
All right.
What did you hear?
I heard me. I said, "Oh, that's what I sound like." I'm like, okay, I get it now.
Okay, so can you elaborate a little bit?
Well, I was waiting to hear. Well, I know Enrique very well, right? So I was listening, but I'm listening. Through the lens differently. What's in the class, and even though I respond to you, I'm listening.
Mm-hmm.
So I was listening for him to say what he was doing for himself. And I was like, he hasn't said anything yet. He started with the story. I'm like, okay, there go the story. But then he's like, yeah, this and this and this and this. And after a while, I said, that's exactly what you sound like. And that's why the professor said what she did. And I was like, I get it. So slow your roll, Enrique.
Right.
I got you. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing, man. I was waiting on you to say, I'm not going in today. I'm not. I've done that before. I've actually pulled up at the masjid and said, I need to go back home. I've done that a couple of times, and I've done it. I made sure somebody was there to be able to take over. But then there was a couple of times I said, they'll be okay. I had to just release myself from that worry. But when you started with your story and all the overwhelm, I've been sharing this with you since it's been happening. And I know, and I should have, as your brother, should have said, well, what are you doing for yourself? And I know that's something that I should have said to you when you was, walking me through everything that was happening with you and your wife, because it's that you are more valuable to the leadership that you provide, whether it's your wife and the prison in this community. And you have to really consider preserving yourself just as much as you want to help, you want to be supportive of everybody else. So just know in the future, I want you to take that position with me as well, and Fatine and Bruce Dan, everybody else. As friends, we have to be there for each other in that way. Inshallah.
So I guess I should. I did make one thing that I'm going to do for myself.
Okay, let's hear it.
Now, I was, besides being in the going to Indonesia, while I was there, I didn't tell you this, but I accepted a position there as the international relations for a university there.
Oh wow!
So that's going to take me around the world traveling, right? So that's kind of like what I wanted to do when I retired. So
wait. So this is your retirement? Wait, hold on.
Are you serious?
Anyway, let me finish.
He said God's still working on me, y'all.
Right. Let me finish now. So what I was gonna, but this is what, before I left, there's a meeting that's gonna be happening at the end of August. And so the owner who I was working with, he said, hey, it would be good if you could come back to this meeting. Now that's in about 2 or 3 weeks. And so I told myself, I said, okay, and I agreed. I said, they're going to fly me back over there. So I said, okay, I'll go back, right? And then I was thinking to myself, oh, I can only stay for a few, if you go that far, I'm not going to stay less than a week. I mean, I got to stay at least a week. But that's what I was doing. I was saying, I'm going to stay a week. And as I was driving back, I was talking to somebody and said, I think I'm just going to stay a couple of weeks. I said, I'm going to kind of ease into my retirement. I already told my boss, I'm getting ready to retire at the end of September instead of the end of December. And just kind of, when I go this time, I was going to take some time. I said, so maybe this time I'll just take that extra week, go to Bali or go somewhere and do, So that's what I'm going to do for myself.
We're going to hold you to it. You got a room full of witnesses right now.
I got you. All right.
Okay. So I want to just acknowledge Julie, who hasn't been able to make it with us with the scheduling changes and all of that. How have you been?
I've been good. I've been on vacation, sort of. And I actually, something really huge in terms of my like trauma and identity and stuff has happened in the last week. I was on vacation with my parents, well, with my whole family, and my sort of life struggle has been against my dad. He's a very dominant figure, and he can be sort of emotionally violent, and a lot of what I was experiencing during our intensive was this renewed feeling that like I needed to claim my voice against my dad, because he has my whole life put me in situations where I feel voiceless. And I have never, when he gets angry and screams at my mother and calls her an idiot and all the things that he does, I've never once stood up for her or said to him, no, you can't do that. And there was an incident recently about 2 months ago where he blew up again, and I didn't do anything, and it made me feel like I was that 5-year-old girl again and that 12-year-old girl again, and it really came to a head for me because I felt like I want to be someone in my work who helps others who are struggling to find their voice and who helps others stand up for themselves. And I was a little hard on myself in saying, like, how are you going to do that for others if you can't do it for yourself? And that is literally just something that has dogged me. I think it's the reason that I'm in seminary is to rebuild myself so that I can become that kind of person. But I've had this looming thing of like, you've got to work this out with your dad first. And so I was kind of dreading the family vacation because I just didn't want him to do anything where I felt like I had to step in and then I would disappoint myself again. And he ended up exactly a week ago, like I was in another part of the house and I heard him screaming at my mother and he called her a effing idiot. And I just walked into the room and I put my arms around my mom and I said, no, you can't talk to her that way. She's not an idiot. And he kept he didn't lash out at me as I thought he would, but he kept sort of telling his side of the story, whatever that was. And I actually reasoned with him. And I thought that like he couldn't hear it, but that didn't matter. It was my reason. It was my access to that was so important.
Right.
And he walked away and then came back and started fighting with my mom again. But I stayed there with her and she started crying and he eventually walked away. And I just like squared off with my mom and I was like, Mom, I don't like it when he demeans you. I hate it when he demeans you. And she looked at me and she said, I know you don't like it. I'm so sorry. And it was the first time ever in my life that my mom had seemed to not excuse his behavior and had seemed to communicate to me that she was seeing the effect that this had on me, 45 years later.
Wow.
And I'd never gotten that from her before, ever. And so then I said to her, I said, Mom, I thank you, but I hate it for you too. You should not have to deal with this. And so I don't know if it's coming across, but that was probably among the 10 biggest moments of my life and the moment that I most needed to carry on with a life of meaning and authenticity. And I'm just so thrilled. I feel like Tanya told me during the intensive week that the thing she sees about me that I don't see in myself is that I don't step into my power. And so I texted Tanya and I was like, I stepped into my power. And so it just feels like it's like a major event for me. So I'm doing really well. I think that so much of my life is going to be impacted by this. So thank you for asking. I know it's not what we're talking about right now, but you did ask an open question, so I thought I'd answer.
Well, I think it is absolutely what we're talking about, right? And one, thank you for trusting us with that story, and for sharing, what you've been sort of kind of struggling with yourself,
Yeah.
to manage. But I think it also takes a lot of bravery to share that process with other people and with us. So thank you for doing that. I'm very humbled that you decided to share that, and also very happy for you. Like, just the moment that you can kind of claim the things that you felt were so elusive, and to do it in such a powerful way, I think is just amazing. So
thank you. I actually was, after it happened, I was actually looking forward to telling all of you about it, because it is so much of what I can't really take care of myself and other people if I don't do this one thing to just stand up for myself and be the person that I know I am within my family of origin, which is so powerful.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
thanks for listening. And I also think that I've been thinking about that in terms of my response to the shootings, and I think that my initial response was to turn to my partner and just say, what are we going to do to change leadership in this country? That's where I went immediately, because leadership is important. It models what's, it allows behavior symbolically, or it disallows behavior symbolically. And I know that these problems go deeper than politics, but I think the reason that I went there was it made sense to me. It was something concrete that I could do. And if you remember, I had this question about, or you asked me if I was optimistic, and I said, no, I don't really think I'm optimistic. And I'd been feeling really overwhelmed by things, just really overwhelmed. But I felt so proactive in my thinking about how to deal with the grief over this shooting. And that to me that's optimism, that feeling that there is something that I can do, and I'm going to do it regardless of whether in the end it's going to have the results that I want, but just looking ahead, 15 months from now, am I going to feel, what's going to make me feel like I stepped into my power? And it was and so all these ideas started flowing about things that I could do to help change the leadership. And so I think that's related to using my voice within my family. I think it's made me feel more powerful. And so when tragedies happen, I don't feel tamped down even more. I kind of have this base to pivot off of now and be okay, what are we going to do?
Yes, absolutely. And I hope that resonates with some of you, and the process of, I think, just kind of taking inventory of where we are and how things might seem kind of tangential, but are actually very much related to how you're reflecting on yourself, right? And because we often don't have time to do that kind of either decompressing, or just to pause and say, okay, let's check in with where we are. I hope that this, last hour has been beneficial in that way. And again, like I always say, there's the agenda, and then there's what's happening right in the moment. And I think that we can always learn from what does it take for us to, like I said, either, kind of slow the car down, figure out where we are, what do we need, what's happening that we didn't sort of connect the dots earlier. And if we can, sort of get into the practice, right, of just pausing at first, right, and then saying, well, before I take any action, right, because the action often does make us feel powerful, right, like if and sometimes it's like physical movement, right, like I got to do something, but what does it take for us to sit with the discomfort that we feel, right, to name it, to identify it, to say where in my body is it showing up, and what do I need, right? What do I need in this moment in order to be able to continue to move forward or to operate in the different capacities that I find myself in? And so, I think the more that it becomes a part of like a routine, right? It's a habit, right? It doesn't feel like it needs to take like an hour, right? It can just be, let me scan, let me figure out where I am. What do I need? Who do I need to ask, right, to kind of help, right, with this work? And then I think also acknowledging what you are learning along the way, right? And so it can become sort of a rolling process where you can sort of say, like, good for me, right? And here's also where I might just need to check in again, right? Does that make sense? Okay. So it's 9:37. I want to give us about a 10-minute break. So let's come back about, say, 9:45. And then what I want to spend the next 15 minutes is actually going through the final assignment. And that'll offer an opportunity for any of the concepts or things that we discussed that will have to be included in those chapters of your spiritual autobiography. It can serve as sort of a review. So how's that? Does that sound like a plan? Okay. So let's come back. It's about 9:38. Let's come back at 9:50. Okay? All right.
Yes, ma'am.
Does anybody know what's the number to call in? Anybody on the line now?
Yes, Enrique, I'm here. This is Kameelah.
Okay.
I think that when you're dialing in, it gives you the option of audio or video.
Yeah, but I'm saying I'm on my phone. I'm not. I didn't dial in the number, so it doesn't give me a complete number. It says 584-839-963. That's not enough numbers.
Let me see. Hang on. No, that's the online link.
Right. Do you know the phone number link?
I don't have it.
Okay, I'll call Munir. I gotta go in. I'm right here. I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna try to call from my office.
Okay, go ahead. We're on break.
All right, bye.
I thought I was off, but I'm not.
Hello. All right. So I hope the break was nourishing. Um, as I said, I want to review the final paper, as some of you may be, moving ahead and thinking about it and how to, structure what needs to be included. So I'm going to share my screen if I can do this properly. Let's see.
I think Celia might have a question. I don't know
Oh.
if she was raising her hand.
Professor, can I just ask one thing?
Yes, I'm trying to find you on my screen. Okay, there you are.
Yeah, okay. I went through this document.
Yes.
And I just wanted to know, I just want to make sure what you're looking for, what you're wanting is just we follow this instruction, right?
Yes, I think.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. That's cool. I
If
already done it, so I'm just curious.
Yeah, so if you follow, so, okay, let me think about what I want to say here. So the format is structured again with these 3 chapters. And the questions that I include under each chapter, I'm not asking that you answer each one, like, right? Say question 1, answer. Question 2, answer, right? So I want you to be able to tie all of these together into a narrative. Let me go back here. Okay. So I want you to tie into a narrative. The questions are meant to kind of guide you in terms of what you might include. So the paper is going to look different, right, for each person. But these 3 chapters, understanding the past, right? So that takes us from where we started in the beginning, around family of origin issues, your role, your identity, the things that might have influenced you, and kind of along the way, this path that you've taken towards being I'd say like a servant, you serve others. And so the questions that I've included under each chapter are meant to sort of synthesize some of the questions that we also wrestled with in the class. Okay. And so beginning with chapter 1, right? I mean, so give it a name, right? What is the chapter of this book? And so looking at the handouts that were given around the identity wheel, your personality, the Johari window, looking at what's open, what's private, what's hidden, what's unexplored, your family health assessment, and also kind of looking at your family genogram, right? So you're going to talk about like who you are, your family of origin, the childhood influences, which have had a significant impact on you. And then these questions from the Spiritual Leader's Guide and the article on the Spiritual Genogram can help you flesh out some of that, okay? So who did you feel closest to growing up, right? Who did you admire? Who were you able to confide in? And perhaps the answer is no one, right? And so in what way did that fact influence perhaps your desire to be of service to other people, right? To be someone who could, be a listening ear for others. And then going to chapter 2, reflecting on the present, right? So this is kind of looking at your life map. Where are you now, right? You started this journey in the class and thinking about, how did I get here? Okay, so your self-care inventory, thinking about clergy burnout, your shape of your daily life, right? And so if someone took a snapshot of where you are now, what does it look like? Okay. So the questions around, I'm a spiritual leader or helping professional because, right? That you might answer that question differently like 5 years ago than how you're answering it now, right? But you want to weave together as sort of a theme those things that you might have carried with you from childhood and how they're showing up now or not, right? Do you see at any points you might have moved in a different direction? And I really want you to sort of maybe think about the clergy burnout cycle, right? So you may have started out very idealistic, right? And that's just wanting to help. And then you're at this moment where you do the shape of your daily life and you're like, hold on a second. I need to completely reevaluate where I am and what I'm doing. And so that can take you into kind of understanding all of the feelings that come up when you start to create these boundaries, right? When you understand your limits, when you think about maybe some of the unhealthy ways that you're trying to work out your own family of origin issues through your service, right? We can be guilty of this as well. And so here's, again, these are sort of guiding questions or ways to frame how you include this information. So that could be thinking about, for chapter 2, what was the high point, right? Like what led you, right, into this life of service? And then maybe, you hit that low point, right? In thinking about, let me maximize my screen here. Oh, hang on one second. Okay. And so, thinking about starting out at a high point and then you hit this low point, right? And maybe it's not low, but maybe a period of uncertainty or feeling kind of burdened or overwhelmed that you need to do some kind of reevaluation. And then what was the turning point, right? Because sometimes we can think a lot about what we might do differently, but then there might be something that, kind of causes us to pause and say, you know what, I think I need to, and I need a new map, right? And then envisioning a healthy future, sort of thinking about your childhood, your family of origin, where you are now, right? This is you charting a course, right? If all of these things were fully integrated, right? Honoring who you were, who you are now, and who you're striving to become. Okay. And so the self-care starter kit, that's on the portal. So I want you to fill that out and include it with this paper as sort of like an addendum, like to the paper, because I want you to have an actual self-care plan, right, that you're thinking about. But I want you to kind of take seriously this idea of writing your obituary, right? So assume that you live to be at least 80 years old when you die, right? At least, what will people say about you? What would you hope that they know about you and who you were striving to be, right? So what is your legacy? What is those things that are important to you that you hope would sort of shape how people are taking your example, right? Would you want somebody to say like, oh man, she was working up until the moment, never took a break, because sometimes we can say that in a very like, in a way that we're celebrating, right? Like, oh, never took a day off, was always, continued to go, gave you the shirt off your back, off her back, and right. But is that actually, right? Or do we want to be able to hear, right, or understand folks thinking about how, yes, we were of service, right? But we also took care of ourselves in a way that also inspired them, okay? And so when you're thinking about what your obituary tells you about your life vision, right? And thinking how close are you to that? Right. And again, this is not as a judgment, right? But as a way to mark your progress, right? You have a past, you have a present, right? You have a future. What are certain things that you're trying to establish now in your present that might help you become, right, that person that you're striving to be? Okay. And I would say include there, what do you need, right? We're not islands. And so the person that you're striving to become might also require that the people in your lives do something different, right? And we have to communicate that, right? And so, finally, tying all of those things together, do you see a theme, right? Kind of like in reflection and retrospect, what would you say emerges, right, as a theme in who you were, who you are, who you're becoming, right? What does that look like? And then, finally, just sort of a brief reflection on what came up for you, right? As you wrote, about all of these different topics. And again, I think like with the expressive writing assignment, when you offer your reflections, I'm not asking you to go into detail, right? But it is more kind of what's called like a meta process, right? So as I was writing this, I noticed that I was really uncomfortable, right? Or that I struggle with certain sections, or this aspect of it came really easily to me. And I loved writing about, what brought me to ministry. but I didn't like so much writing about why I'm running away from it, right? And so it's kind of noticing, yourself in that way. Okay. Any questions?
Yes, Assalamu alaikum. I'm back. I'm trying to process. I mean, I'm excited to be able to formulate some type of personal inventory of myself like this. I've never done anything like it. But as I think Tanya had mentioned, sometimes these exercises, when you begin to explore them and explore yourself, you kind of hesitate on certain things that perhaps you never either knew were there, or that you kind of feel reluctant to address in yourself. But either way, because I've been doing so much traveling, and not traveling for pleasure, of course, I'm gonna probably have to get with you offline to see exactly how to formulate this paper with the notes that we've accumulated over the course, time of the course, because I'm, as you know, my situation right now, I'm trying to focus on so many things, personal things at this point, but I'm really excited about what you just explained. As far as you mentioned an addendum to the previous reflection paper. Now, which one was that? The one that we did?
So with the final paper, what has been posted is called a self-care starter kit.
Okay.
And so I want you to keep that. And so what I would say to kind of tackle this, because this is not something that you can leave to one night. I would very much discourage that. Because you might be overwhelmed, right? And so, similar to how with the expressive writing, it was 20 minutes, right? In even, uninterrupted time. And so, if you think about these 3 chapters, I would say, taking perhaps this first chapter, right? Family of origin, that's going to bring up a lot, right? And so it could be, starting out with that kind of expressive writing like reflection, right? That you sat down to kind of, even thinking of a name for the chapter, right? Because I do these exercises too, because I would hate to give you something that I have never done or challenge myself to do. And so when I was thinking about chapter 1, I was like, oh man, like what could capture what my life was growing up, like in Brooklyn, one of 7 children. So even getting caught on that, right? And I recognize that even getting caught on the title of the chapter was in some way my way of avoiding it, right? Like I wanted the perfect, like, it's gotta be, it's gotta be good, right? And I was like, hey, Kameelah, that is you not wanting to get into this. And so I would say, take maybe allotting yourself, right, 20 to 30 minutes of a piece of this, right? Okay. And like I said, I'm not asking you to answer every single question, because you might start like with one prompt, and the story that you begin to share might cover all of that and more. But these are kind of ways to sort of get you into the assignment. And I would say, and then take breaks. This is why I don't want you, why I posted it a couple weeks ago, because I don't want you to kind of try to get it all together in one sitting. If you find yourself doing that, please email me. And so if you find that you're, like you said, either really crunched for time, or you're finding that you want to create distance from it for a certain reason, like just communicate with me and let me know. Because it's really meant to be a tool that you can use in the future, right? Like your own map, right? Where was I? Where I am now? Where am I trying to go? And so you can use it as a way to mark your own progress, as a reminder, to say, okay, am I drifting I said I wanted to go? And so what do I need perhaps to bring me back? So does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, you've identified those things that need to be avoided, but also highlighted the things that you're looking for. Because I'm thinking like you. I was thinking starting off as a story and trying to make this something that that people would want to hear. But you mentioned too, because I think I started with the reflection one time like that, and then I had to stop and back up. Because and then that's when it became harder for the reflections as the days went on, as the second and third day went on. But I'm gonna be mindful. I'm making a note of that now to be mindful of that when working on this particular assignment. So thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or things that are coming up as you approach this assignment?
I have a question. Well, at some point, will we get feedback for our previous reflection papers? I'm thinking that's gonna probably help with how we do this paper.
Yes. So that was gonna actually be my next. I'm trying to get everyone's. This is due on the 16th. So I'm trying to get everyone's assignments back by the 11th. I'm wrapping up this week, so I know I won't be able to do that. So by Sunday the 11th, you should have your assignments back.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other?
I have just a very English teachery question. It's 12 to 15 pages double spaced.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. That's all.
Okay.
And that's not including the additional self-care plan, right? That's just the writing content.
That's just the
okay. I wanted to make sure, because sometimes my brain does oh, I'm good, but then I'm like, no, I need to make sure this isn't just the writing and not including the additional things.
Yeah, so the self-care starter kit is the plan that you'll complete and include as an addendum.
Okay. Yeah. And we just email it to you, correct? We just attach both in an email?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. How many of you have done something like this before? Yeah. Kind of? In what
some
ways?
Some areas, but not all.
Okay. And in what ways is it similar?
Just some of the writing assignments that we had for our spiritual, pastoral care and spiritual care class with Dr. Greer. Not all of the areas, but some work around kind of understanding your past and what are some of the things that kind of you bring to the work of spiritual care and counseling, and just kind of the understanding of how when you understand yourself better, you can kind of see the humanity and the shared experiences that all people go through. And so certain things about understanding your family of origin and culture and different things like that, not in the same way that it's broken up like this to this detail, but just including some of those pieces in other papers. Yes. With the context of how can you better serve others. First you have to do the act of loving and caring for yourself, that kind of context.
Yes. So this, I think, what's slightly different, I think, is that it's forcing you to focus inward in a way that might be a little uncomfortable. Because when we are often, and this is true of my training as well, that often when we're giving assignments to think about, it's like, well, think about yourself in relationship to how you are with others, right? Like in your role in the service, as a clinician, as a therapist, for me in my training. But when it's purely, right, like this reflection is for you, then it becomes something slightly different. Yeah. Okay. Not out of time. Okay, so we're good on time. Any other questions, comments in general, before I just let you all know about the final sort of, since we won't have another online meeting, what I'm going to ask is just to kind of I'm going to put a question on the forum, and then ask you guys to respond to it, and then respond to one other person. But I'll send those instructions.
I had one question.
Yes.
If I just take is it okay if I just take the questions posed and respond to them? Or do you want me to put it in a more narrative form?
Yes. So the questions are sort of guiding questions.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would like you to sort of weave together a narrative.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Professor, I already done it once. So I have a draft already, and maybe I'm just too lazy. I actually just follow your questions, and each question brought out more stories. So I'm not saying I'm just following your question, but I actually wove the questions. And so I'm not going to rewrite the whole thing because I'm not doing a nonfiction, or something, but it is my life, and I've actually done it many times like this. So I'm actually delighted to do it again to see what comes up. And so hopefully that'll be all right with you.
Yes, I would encourage you to see how, perhaps even reflecting on the changes between the previous similar documents you've completed.
No, I'm not talking about this document. It's the same document. I have been reflecting on my life for a long time. Every few years I go into a reflective mode. So it's actually very comfortable for me to deal with my own emotions. So I'm not afraid of it. I could tell the nuances there. So I actually included a nuance, but I'm not going to say, 20 years ago I was this way. And no, that'll be a novel. I really don't want to do that much because I have so much going on right now. So, but I'm saying that I'm going to submit this because it is a tapestry of my life. And I also discovered that some part of this instruction, there's some redundancy. So I'm trying to really clean up so I could tell the stories without repeating to answer some similar questions.
So tell me what you mean. What feels redundant?
Well, just in the self-care starter kit, it asks you questions. So you went through, answered them, and then at the end, it asks you again. So to me, in my way of looking, my self-care is I know exactly what I need to do. So I'm not going to fight with it. I'm still repeating it. I'm just saying that I could tell what I need, and it's just a matter of really committing and have a discipline to do it. That's all. Yeah.
And I think in that final, if I'm remembering correctly, that final page is designed to be like a summary, right? And so you had like a one-pager that you had to include all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. There's some very loud noise in the background. I don't know what's going on, so I can't hear.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, that sounds fine. Any other questions? No?
I think there might be a question in the chat that Chris submitted, that if we've already completed it, are you open to kind of like a preview before the final submission?
Is that you want to submit it, or you want me to review it?
I was looking to see if you're one of the professors that likes, that would review it before we submit, to send any type of critique or anything back, so that we can fine tune it.
No, I'll have to say I won't have time to review a draft. So if you've completed it, you can always turn it in, but I won't have the time between now and when it's the deadline to turn it back to you. Okay. Any other, I'm sorry, I can't see the chat since I'm sharing my screen. So are there any other questions? No? Okay. So let's see.
Can you, when you're done sharing your screen, can you look at the chats and?
Okay. Okay. So Feng, you were saying you think 12 to 15 pages might not be enough, or are you saying that you think it'll be longer? Oh, you're muted. I can't hear you.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's going to be longer. But, yeah, that's okay, right?
Yeah, I would say I didn't want to give a page number that people felt would be like climbing Mount Everest, right? But I also didn't want it to be 5 pages, because what would you say? In 5 pages, right? And so I kind of settled on this number, right? And divided it into those chapters. So, as if, okay, chapter 1 is, say, 5 pages, chapter 2, right? But if you find that there's more, then that's certainly okay. Okay.
And mine came out to be about 14, 15 pages on the written, but with the appendix that you required on that, took it up to about 21 pages.
So the self-care addendum is separate, right? So the self-care starter kit, what I'm saying is that's separate.
The appendix you're talking about is separate.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm not including that in the final page guidelines. Okay. And I'll just say again, similar to the expressive writing assignment, if you feel like there are things that you do not want to divulge, that you do not want to sort of revisit, then I would trust you to take care of yourself, right? So I don't want anyone to, kind of approach this this assignment in a way that you feel like may cause you more harm, right? Does that make sense? And so I want you to kind of, yes, I want you to complete the assignment, because I think self-reflection is a difficult process that we have to practice how to do. But I also don't want you to feel like you're delving into a space or to, you're delving into memories that really would require that you be walking hand in hand with like a mental health professional. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I think for me, some parts of it, it's like building. So I've sort of laid it out.
Okay.
And as I've been like looking at my family, there's some dark areas, not in events, but in just not knowing. So there's some areas as I'm moving, it's kind of like deep sea diving. I can't see. I don't know what, so, I'm trying to sense and search old feelings and memories that I'm sort of grasping at in stories. And while trying to do that and enjoying it, there's the beckoning of the other final projects. And so I feel like, it's a place where I want to go, but the respectful time and is not being provided because of, life circumstances.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, perhaps that you are looking forward to the assignment, but perhaps you feel like you can't really do it justice because of other limitations.
Right. And the place that I already sense there's a place that I have to go, like within myself, there's a place I have to go. And then some of those places are sort of like a shadow of, and I'm trying to determine. So the first chapter, I'm literally, so I'm trying to use the idea of light, that as I move from chapter 1, 2, and 3, it's like moving from sort of the shadow or darkness, but into light. And so that I know that there are some areas though, like that I won't be able to have the presence of being to properly give voice to what I'm feeling or sensing. Because one thing I thought, I was like, well, let me call someone in the family. Let me do this. And I'm like, you don't have the time to do that. So I'm just a little concerned because I want to benefit from it. Yes. I'm a little concerned about how deep to dive, and so that I'm not just doing the assignment to say it's done, but that I'm going to profit from it.
So I think kind of exploring the questions honestly, and even noting where you feel, maybe that you might want to kind of like bookmark, right?
Okay.
Like here's where I'm going to stop for the purposes of the paper. Let me make a note to myself as, this is an area of exploration that now I'm kind of curious about.
Okay.
And so, because I wouldn't want, kind of either fear or anxiety about going to a certain place to paralyze you. Right. And so it could be a matter of saying, maybe I write a full version and then I edit out parts that I want to keep for me.
Okay.
Okay. So maybe that can still get your thought process flowing. And then you say, well, maybe I'm uncomfortable, right? No one reads these papers but me. But maybe you're saying, I'm still trying to sit with what all of that meant. So I'm not ready for someone else, right, to view it. That's perfectly okay. And so I think that the final version that you submit will, one, be like, I want you to kind of challenge yourself not to kind of stay in your comfort zone, right? Go to, some of like the growth edges, but I don't want you falling off the cliff either. Okay. And so if, again, kind of similar to the expressive writing, you can tell, right, yourself when you're, I'm kind of walking into a place where I'm not prepared to go. I don't know where to come back from. Like, I might need to talk about this with a therapist. right? Or, you know, when we talked about like, what is the story you're trying to tell around the trauma so it feels like it's coherent? That kind of disclosure, I would encourage you to do with a professional, right? Am I answering your question?
Yes, but more no. I'm thinking about areas where, and I'm thinking about family, like when we talk about family, there's not much I can say about my father's side of the family or my father. So that's a dark area. So I can't.
Write about that.
Huh?
Right. I would say write about that.
Okay.
And instead of saying, well, let me call up this person who can give me, because then that becomes their memories that they're giving to you.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And so if that's kind of a shadowy area, or that's a place that you don't have a lot of information about, right? I don't know if I shared it with you all, but no, it was also with a different student, but even someone's absence impacts.
Okay.
Right. And so that would be your memory, right? What is it for you not to be able to have clarity or information, or, you know, and so that's what I would include.
Okay, great. There it is. You answered it for me. Thank you.
Okay, good.
Professor, you asked this question. I have a different kind of questions. You're the only one who's going to read this paper, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so that's the confidentiality that it's then, you know, I'm trusting. So if I was going to talk about something in my past, nobody else is going to read it.
No, I'm the only one that reads these papers.
Good.
Yes.
And I was going to say thank you so much for kind of expanding on how you can kind of write everything out and then edit, because that's kind of what I've been doing with every writing assignment. I think a lot of things come up for me. This class has been incredibly, it's been doing the work that I figured it would do, that I was anxious about. So that's a good, and it's been hard. It's been hard because there are some things that I think that come up when you don't expect it to, or memories that you're able to look back through now that you're an adult and you can kind of see it for what it really was. And so what I've done in the reflective papers and even just other assignments is I've written out everything that's come up, and then I reread everything and edit out things that I'm like, okay, this it was helpful for me to get it out and save it as a first draft, but then cut and paste things. Because there are some things that I did disclose in other assignments, trusting that it was only going to be for your eyes, but that I also felt was really helpful for me to write it out. And I even wrote that in a paper. I was like, I needed to name this because for a long time I haven't been able to just name it. So I just wanted to share that that's something that I've done for these assignments, is kind of just allowed myself the time and emotional energy to write everything that comes up, and then as safe as I feel, and then kind of edit myself for the purposes of submitting the assignment. Because like Fong said, I was like, it can become like 5-page assignments, then went on to like 12 pages. I'm like, okay, now that you put out your life, edit it for what you needed to do.
Yes. And I think that's such a beautiful way of practicing boundaries and limits, right? And so if there's something, again, that you're not comfortable with, even knowing that I'm the only one that views it, and that you would like to remain as part of like your hidden quadrant, right? That's fine. That's absolutely fine. So in that way, I want you to take care of yourselves as you write it. And you'll have that opportunity at the very end, right? Part of the conclusion, to give kind of, even if it's a paragraph, right? Your overall kind of reflection, right? What was that like, right? Is this a document that maybe you would want to share with one other person in your life, right? Is it something that it would take quite a bit for you to begin to open up and say, you know, I want someone to bear witness to my journey, right? And so you have that opportunity for a reflection that speaks to the process and not just the content, okay? So it is 10:32, and I, again, want to respect your time. If there are any other questions, email me. My last day of internship is August 9th. So I'm kind of also in a flurry of getting certain things done in anticipation of ending my training. And so if there's a delay in me responding, I ask for your patience and your forgiveness now. But if it's something, of course, that is urgent, then I will definitely respond. So, you know, maybe it's like, I'm not quite sure how to do this. I'm going to put this on hold until I get a response from you. I'll definitely respond. And like I said, by the 11th, I'll make sure you have your other assignments back to you with my comments. Okay. All right. Please take care of yourselves. Again, you're modeling the way as you go. And so just taking notice of what you need, how you're feeling, how you're doing. And, you know, definitely I'll talk to some of you if you have questions kind of offline, privately about the assignment. I'm open to that as well. Okay. All right. Well, with that, I wish you all a good night. And I want to thank your families for allowing you to be away for just a little bit so that you can join the class. All right. So have a good night. Assalamu alaikum.